You've got a lot of windows open, Harris.
Yeah, I know.
Isn't there a rule that before you do
Yeah.
anything where you might share your screen, you have to shut down everything?
Yeah, I live life on the edge. Yeah, but it's a good policy to have.
I don't follow it. I like to understand the policies without following them.
Oh, great. We've got people trickling in.
What are you writing? Are you drawing a picture? You're doing a
No,
portrait of me.
making notes for this interview.
It's a bit late for that. It
Yeah,
started.
yeah. Shall we kick off?
Sure, why not?
Yeah. Okay, amazing. Thanks everyone for joining. For people who are joining live and people who are watching this back on the recording, I'm Harry Schwabe. I'm founder and CEO of Newton's Tree. Welcome to our webinar series looking at unfiltered AI leadership. And I'm very excited for this episode. I mean, one of the perks of this job is getting to sit down on a couch and chat to my friends. And I think Kev's not too offended with me calling him a friend.
Absolutely not.
Um,
Apart from the fact you made me pay for the steak in Crawley. That was offensive.
yeah, you'll have to send me an expense receipt. So Kev and I have known each other for a few years, and he's done a real tour in the medtech industry in the UK and also further afield as well. And I'm really excited to this conversation. Kev, I want to invite you to introduce yourself, and as a Kickstarter, give us sort of a summary about your journey in selling medtech into healthcare.
Sure. So, Kevin Shah, been in and around healthcare since about 2000 and maybe 2008. So, I used to work for a company called Ascom that were doing loan work, staff protection systems, and mental health. Then went from there into another couple of IT companies, ended up in GE. So I was doing service sales in GE for the UK and across Europe, which was my first kind of understanding of what a PACS and a RIS was. And I literally sat in the car park at Pollard's Wood trying to remember what PACS and RIS stood for because I had no idea. Managed to get the job and did that for a while. Went from there to...
What year was this when you were learning about PACS?
2013.
Okay.
So this was just at the end of the LSP. So they hired me just when all the LSP contracts were running out.
Do you want to explain what LSP is?
I don't really remember what the...
It's from the NP Fit.
The NP Fit, the exit of the NP Fit. So that's when all of the networks had to then basically go their own way. So it was a point in time where the NHS could have done amazing things to centralise, but unfortunately decided to go a different route and then localised. So I was at G for a short while, then went to Fujifilm in the UK and then across Europe, where I was working through enterprise imaging deals, PACS, VNA, advanced visualization, pathology. So then got into digital pathology, which is a really exciting space. And then that was kind of my early entry into AI. So talking to Chris at Lunit, their team at Cure, a few other people in other AI companies. And then interestingly, I chatted with Dimitri from Annalise, left Fujifilm, I went to a startup in Cambridge called Sighted, a novel esophageal cancer detection company that had a pill on a string, which meant that you could then take patients outside of an endoscopy suite and you could test them in a car park in pretty much any space at all. A really novel, innovative technology, and also outsourcing telepathology. So that was I did a year there.
That was separate from Sighted.
That was Sighted.
Oh, that was Sighted. Yeah.
In Cambridge. And then I left Sighted and then got a job at Annalise, and I was at Annalise 2.5 years, plus or minus a few months. A really interesting Australian startup, chest X-ray and CT brain, and that's where really we got into the detail of how do you sell this stuff.
Yeah.
The complications around how investors in AI technologies think it should be sold and the value proposition versus the actual on-the-ground experience of buyers, the complications of buying these technologies, which are tested and tried, but are they tested and tried in your environment? And then you have some other challenges around deployment, integration, triage, change management, which is a hugely big conversation. And as we talked earlier, a very different experience to maybe 10 years ago selling the first AI solutions, which were liver a liver volumetry software
Mm,
CAD package, which is AI to some degree,
yeah.
where you'd go and see a clinician who was a liver surgeon, and they would say, I need this software because it currently takes me an hour to do this work, and I can do this 5 times. That saves 5 hours. The return on investment is obvious.
Yeah.
They then go to the FD, get it signed off, and they buy the software. Selling AI at an enterprise level is a much different journey.
Okay. I mean, fascinating um, sort of journey in history. I want to go back right to the beginning, which is what was the motivation? I mean, it's all of these. I mean, none of these are trivial experiences, right? And it's not like you found your groove, selling packs and Riz and sort of stuck to it. You've jumped around a bit, which is a challenging thing to do, even if it's still within healthcare. So where does the drive or commitment come from?
So I left school at 16 to become a car mechanic.
Wow.
And then I ran a building company, worked in the Alps. I've done all kinds of things. So I went to university. Through university, I worked, bought and sold. I mean, anything, cars, audio gear, whatever. I'm commercial. I love selling, but I also love people, and I like working in teams. So my motivation is really about people and teams.
Yeah.
I don't have a career path. So my job is what I currently do. What I'll do next, I'm open to whatever would be interesting and would be a challenge for me. I also had cancer in 2006. I had a mucoepidermoid carcinoma in the roof of my mouth. And that changed my perspective on things. Obviously, when you have a significant health issue, I also had mercury poisoning, I had shingles and a few other things. So I had a few
Oh,
bad
wow.
years.
Okay.
But that changes your perspective on things. And now I particularly like healthcare because you're adding more than just the value of selling something. You're adding something that can actually materially affect patients' lives. And we had a case at Annalise of a lady called Diane in the Royal Surrey. So she had an early, a difficult to detect lung nodule, would have been missed by the radiologist. In fact, I think they said they would have missed it.
Yeah.
And they ran the analysis on it and they found it, and then she moves into treatment at stage 1. And if you're more than 70 years old, picking up a cancer at stage 1 versus stage 3 or stage 4 is going to have a materially different effect on your life.
Amazing.
So yeah.
And that's a really good starting point for the discussion, which is like the impact of AI and the challenge around adoption
Yeah.
and how different it's been from your perspective compared to your early days selling what I could probably safely describe as more straightforward technologies, like Riz, GE,
Yeah.
PACS, VNAs, and things like that. Why the difference in experience?
So I think the challenge so I think you've got, so I cover Europe, Middle East and Africa in the
Yeah.
last few roles I've had, and there is a huge difference in market between the NHS. Europe is not. I mean, there's no such. Europe is a thing, but it's not a thing. It's a multitude of different countries that have different healthcare systems. So
Yeah.
selling in Switzerland versus Spain versus Germany versus France versus the Nordics, wildly different. Prices are different, experience is different, expectations are different.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Middle East, which is even more different. I think the real difference is that with AI, predominantly the products that I've been selling have been products that provide quality, it was triage and quality. And in the current system, it's very difficult for a health system to pay for quality because the quality is owned by the radiologist, and giving the radiologists tools that make them provide better quality outcomes is a budget that sits on top of what you're already paying for. So if you're triaging and you can get patients that need care to the top of the list, that's really valuable, right?
Yeah.
Because that
Yeah.
means
Yeah.
that patients aren't going to get missed. If you are providing decisions around do we thrombolyze this patient or not in a stroke type situation, that makes a material difference to the patient. But for something like a chest x-ray as an example, it's more difficult to prove the point because if you detect cancer earlier, it doesn't make a difference to the department. So the radiology department are paying for software that actually provides value, arguably 18 months down the line where the patient would have been found and the care would have been much more expensive, but it doesn't sit in that same pocket. So
Yeah.
now with this 10-year plan, it's interesting that the idea to move towards multi-year return on investment, multi-year value, and
Yeah.
patient benefit could be a tipping point. So I look at the 10-year plan, I think it's a super positive
Yeah.
plan. The devil is in the detail. Implementation is everything, and it's very difficult, but I like the idea of taking things outside of the typical 1st of April to the 30th of March cycle, because that cycle is really, really difficult to affect positive technical change with digital software packages.
But I mean, I completely agree, but I want to.
You don't agree if you say but.
Yeah, but which is where I'm going to show you where I don't agree, which is you were selling 10-year PAX contracts,
Yep.
which do not net you a positive return in year one. So we were able to invest in multi-year projects and had the discipline and faith
Yep.
that we were going to get a return without the need for the new 10-year plan.
So the PAX doesn't have a return, right? So the PAX is an established infrastructure piece that you have to have. In the same ways you have to have ambulances, you have to have doors on hospitals, you have to have surgical squads.
But we didn't have PAXs
But you do
before we had PAXs.
But you do now.
And how did that happen?
So I think the original PAX, the original return on investment on PAX was the silver. So it was the cost of the film. So take out the cost of the film, and then all of a sudden you've got a return on investment to buy PAX, and our PAX just iterates and iterates and iterates and becomes a software. It's one of the, without a PAX system, without a risk in a PAX, a hospital doesn't work.
Yeah,
right? So you've got no choice, and there's a budget that's established, and generally those budgets aren't going up, right? So if you sell a PAX system today, or you sold a PAX system 5 years ago, you're not going to get a significantly larger amount of money now. And actually what happens in PAX deals now is the customer says you've got to throw all this other stuff in, right? So we need teaching files, we need some AI, we need some additional software packages that you need to do, Mr. PAX vendor, in order to be compliant on the tender and then get all the marks that then gives you that wins you the tender. So PAX is slightly different. With the AI market as it currently sits, there is no real solid established budget. So a hospital clinical director or CFO can't say, I have a budget of £1 million a year to pay for AI, or 100,000 or whatever it is to pay for AI. That could include efficiency. It could include some MR protocols. That means you can run your MR suites more efficiently. It could include AVT. It could include imaging AI. It could include triage. They don't have the budget.
And so has the challenge been for AI to find its replacing film moment? Like, what's the thing that you're allowing me to not spend money on anymore?
So we're not. But so that question has a multitude of parts. So for something like a stroke detection software package, can you change the treatment path for that patient and make a material difference to their life? Absolutely, yes. Therefore, there's a return on investment, right? Because there is a cost of treating that patient.
Yes.
For MSK, can we send the patient home? Yes or no? That then saves money.
Yes.
For things like chest X-ray and for some of the other modalities, you don't have that same immediate return on investment. And what you also have is you have a workforce that is depleted, it is overworked, overwhelmed, and they don't have capacity. So the other
capacity
to deliver, to report. So radiology. So if you look at the Royal College of Radiologists report, I don't know the exact percentages, so I'm not going to make them up, but there is a significant gap in the amount of people training to be radiologists versus the current radiology workforce. And then you have a significant dip after COVID of radiologists retiring early. I think it was something like 51 was the average age of retiring radiologists, which is crazy, right? Then you have teleradiology companies that are using the NHS radiologists to report the same cases. And then obviously they charge, which is fair for them to do because they are taking work out and they're delivering against it. So you have a massively depleted workforce, you have a huge amount of work, and the complexity and type of cases they're dealing with are, it's not like a 16-slice CT, it's a 128, 256. Each of those CTs take a lot longer to report. The MRs are much more complicated, much more difficult to read. So you've got the same level of plain films, or an increasing level of plain films, plus a significant amount of really complicated work, and a decreasing workforce. So anyone anywhere would say, and investors I'm sure look at this and think, well, it's obvious, right? AI, it's the only way forward. Absolutely, it's the only way forward to augment radiologists, to help them with efficiency and to deliver better care. But the flip side of that is who pays for it? Because you have a crisis where there's no extra money. There's a heap of other stuff going wrong in the NHS that needs to be fixed. You've got pay increases for NHS workers, which is critical and important, but there isn't a never-ending pot, right? So the challenge is how do we deliver better care to patients with the technology and the people that we've got, And interestingly, the other point of the 10-year plan is the, changing it from the National Health Service to the Neighbourhood Health Service. So if you could go to see your GP polyclinic and have your chest X-ray there because you think you've, broken your shoulder bone or something like that, and they could then detect a really early stage lung cancer, then all of a sudden you're doing this not screening, but you're using technology that can pick up things that otherwise would be missed to then early detect. So every way you look at it, it adds value, but there isn't budget for it.
Yes. You've covered a lot of topics I want to go deep into. I want to go first into vendors.
Yep.
So I was reading something yesterday, I think from the Imaging Wire, that we're almost at 1,000 FDA approved radiology AI products, 996 or something. And you've listed some
that doesn't mean there's 1,000 vendors though, right?
True, correct. Yeah, of course. And you've listed some of the successful use cases.
Yep.
Like stroke and possibly MSK and maybe a few others. But then there's so many that aren't as successful, that haven't cracked the reimbursement or payment challenge. Why do they exist?
Well, some of them don't.
Okay. Well, of the ones, or even those, why did they come to being?
So MaxQ is an example. Used to exist, don't exist anymore, right?
Tell us about MaxQ.
So MaxQ is so let's not use the name.
Fine.
There's a multitude of AI radiology companies that either don't exist anymore, they've sold their IP on, or they're at the point of a very difficult shift because
the question is
why is there so many?
Why did they come to fruition? Why did they come to exist in the first place? Like, if the reimbursement or payment path wasn't clear, who decided to fund them, and why were they funded?
So that's the question you've got. So that's the question. So I'm not a founder and I'm not an investor.
Yeah.
So the question is not for me, but I can give you my opinion.
Yes. Yeah.
My opinion is that a founder who is, an ex-clinician or who is someone that's got a deep knowledge of imaging has an idea. That idea makes a lot of sense, right? So
From
as an example,
clinical
MSK, chest X-ray, any of these technologies, you could have 20 different companies working on the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Or let's just say MR. So, a very niche MR, software package that someone's built, and it's really, really good, but not realizing that the total addressable market and the service addressable market are actually quite small. And each of those deployments, the cost of acquisition of each of those deployments is really quite significant. So, if let's just say in the UK, in the NHS, there's 50 sites that could use this niche product.
Yeah.
And you would charge 50 to 100 grand for that. You know what the total market is.
Yeah.
And that probably isn't enough to run a business. So you've created IP with a story around a buyer, and there's tremendous value for that buyer or the clinical user to buy that product, but not understanding the change, the cost of change. Plus then, okay, so you set up a company, you sell in the UK, you then choose to go to Europe, you then choose to go to the Middle East, you then choose to go to the US, you then choose to go to APAC. Each of those markets you're adding, I mean, there's some exceptions with EU MDR, but some of the markets you're adding, you have to go through regulatory pathways, you have to go through language changes, you have to go through product registration. All of that is a massive cost. And all of a sudden, you've got a business that needs lots of people, and you haven't got significant revenues. So the cost of acquisition is a difficult challenge. And interestingly, where Newton's Tree comes in is, you deploy once. So you deploy your platform once, and whether you deliver one algorithm or you deliver 50 algorithms, it makes no real difference to you.
Yes.
So there is a great benefit to going through platforms. I personally don't like platforms. I've been pretty clear with you about that. Most platforms, I should say.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the platform do enable faster onboarding. But even with the platform play, it's not flying off the shelf, right? You're not seeing, I'm not looking at the industry news and seeing, another platform has won another deal here, another platform's won another deal here. There's another 6 algorithms being rolled out.
Yeah. So distribution is only part of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Culture and change. So Annalise was very lucky. We won 40 plus NH trusts through the AIDF.
Yeah.
And I can tell you the deployment effort for each of those was not linear. So, Manchester, we went through Sectra. It was very, very fast. The fastest deployment that we did out of all of them. And there are others
through the Sectra platform.
Through the Sectra Amplifier platform, because it was already installed, already up and running. So, it's like a tick box exercise and then some clinical training and all the other paperwork.
Of course.
But then you've got other networks that might have, 5 different trusts with different packs, or they might have the same packs but different versions, and each of those needs a different implementation. That implementation has a cost. That cost then needs to be paid. Each of those needs a resource from the PACS vendor. That PACS vendor resource may not be available. There may be an EPR project that's underway. There might be a risk change that's underway. So all of a sudden, your idea that we're going to win a deal and deploy it in 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, you're 9 months later and there's no date, right? It's just the reality of the NHS. And I think that there are, if you haven't got much revenue, and you're you're investor led, the burn rate of cash, or the amount of cash you need to get to that pivot point, is really tricky.
Because of your staff cost, in-house engineering, all
Staff
that
cost, third-party costs to do QA/RA. You need to have software systems in place for tracking. It is an expensive enterprise. So you see the companies that seem to be doing well at this stage of the market. So Gleamer, fabulous, doing a great job, right?
Yeah.
They win with one product, then they sell others. They've just bought a couple of MR algorithms.
Yes.
And they've worked really well. You look at ADOC. They started off with one thing, then they started to use sell third-party algorithms. Again, another company that's done well. It's easier for companies that have got a wider portfolio than it is for a company with a single solution, unless it's really like ultra niche.
Yes. Well, so can I ask about this world then? So, so going back to my initial question around, why all these companies sprouted and why some of them have declined. A lot of it is around customer acquisition costs and the distribution challenge, and forgetting about sort of the platform component for a second, does it not mean that in the future, ultimately, the only way that this is sustainable in terms of large-scale AI adoption is via the incumbents, like the health IT providers, the OEMs, the PACS, RIS, etc., because they've already got scale, they've already got installations?
It's a good question, and I think this is something you could debate for a long time. So, arguably, if you're a PACS vendor and you have, every hospital in pretty much in Europe and Middle East and the US has a PACS, right?
Yeah.
And many have EPRs. So the easiest route to market to implement into those hospitals is through those platforms.
Yeah.
The PACS vendors generally aren't super motivated to sell other people's products, right? Because it's difficult.
Yeah.
So, why do I want to sell and I'm making up the numbers, but a 20K, 50K, 100K system when my enterprise imaging contract could be 10 times that?
Yes.
The amount of effort I've got to put in, the fact that it's a third party, the fact that there's third party risks, is it any good? Is it going to work? All of those things are a challenge to their core focus, which is to sell their own products, right? They can set, they're happy to sell barcode, ISO, they'll workstations, because that's, it's hardware. You just transact it and it's done.
Yeah.
And the support's good. But for things like, for things with clinical input, it's quite risky. It's quite, not risky, but you need to be involved in the journey. And some are interested, some aren't.
And do you think that is going to become sort of a specialty by itself, like actually being an expert in AI adoption or implementation, or whatever the word you want to use is?
I don't know. I think that where we are at the moment is that there are a number of, I would call them centers of excellence, early starters, that have deployed, multiple AI algorithms. And then there's a significant amount of sites that have deployed one.
Yeah.
Whether that's stroke because of the stroke network, whether that's MSK because they've got a particular use case in ED, whether that will be ambient voice. So ambient voice is this monster that's flying down the road, right?
Yes, yeah.
And everyone's interested in it. It has a huge efficiency, potential huge efficiency generator, but it also has relatively significant risk.
Yeah.
The whole class 1, class 2 debate is a really interesting one.
Yeah.
Is it summarizing? If not, then arguably some people say it needs to be class 1. If it is summarizing, it needs to be class 2, A or B. I mean, that's a decision for the regulators.
Yeah.
But personally, I think it has to be, because if it's making a decision on the clinical pathway based on summarization of information, you have to assume that is it's materially changing a transcription, right? No different to what a clinician, no different to what a clinician would do.
Yes.
And arguably, even a slightly less accurate voice AVT solution may be more accurate than a super tired GP at the end of a 8 or 10 hour shift, where he's sitting there and she's sitting there and they're trying to remember the conversation that happened 5 minutes ago because they didn't want to take their eyes off the patient at the time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we've all sat in the GP surgery where the GP's basically been ignoring you, typing answers to questions that, you know, really don't feel that relevant.
Yeah.
This technology, it's coming and it's coming fast. Will the adoption of AI in ambient voice make a material difference to other AI? Potentially it will. I mean, how will it be managed? How will version change be managed? So for algorithms like for Pixel AI, you buy an algorithm, it's a set stack lock code that's gone through regulatory approval.
Yeah.
It's deployed, it doesn't change. There's nothing changing on there. With Gen AI and AVT, the back end is generally a third party
like
back
an open AI model or something.
And how do I know if I have the same consultation with a GP today as I do tomorrow, or in 30 days time, or 60 days, or 180 days, it's going to provide the same results?
Yeah.
That is a significant challenge that we've yet to see an answer to.
Yeah. Well, before I ask you my follow-up question, I know we've dived right in. I'm more than happy and invite the audience to dive in with their own questions. That's why I've got an iPad in front of me. So please chime in with anything that you want me to put to Kevin. But what I'll ask as follow-up to this AVT topic is, if you were in charge of one of the big AVT players, the commercial arm of one of these AVT players in the NHS.
Yep.
How would you pitch it?
I'd want regulatory approval, and I'd want to make sure that we had a really good story about quality. And then I'd be pitching the value proposition, right? So the value proposition is, we will make you more efficient and we'll give you the ability to spend time with your patient. So there's two things. One is the efficiency. The other is the perceived lack of focus on the patient in the patient journey. So when you go and see a doctor and he's sitting or she's sitting typing on a computer, it's very impersonal.
Yeah.
If you have an AVT and the doctor is looking at you and paying attention to you, the experience is super different, right?
But so this is interesting, right? And this is somewhere where, like, I've been sort of caught in two minds because, like you, a lot of my background is in the imaging world, and we've had sort of drilled into our head about evidence, about people don't pay for quality, they pay for cost savings, all this sort of stuff. And then you have AVTs come along where the evidence is at best equivocal, right? The big Stanford study came out a few months ago that showed that for people who are competent using a keyboard, the average time saving for using AVT is 1 minute in a consultation. And
how many consultations a day, right?
Well, true, but yeah, but that's to one side. And there's not been large-scale sort of prospective trials, so there isn't a stack of evidence. There's regulatory ambiguity, but lo and behold, people are willing to pay, especially in primary care, pay for this stuff left, right, and centre. So why is it getting a different treatment?
I don't know.
And it just
so two things. Firstly, I don't know, and secondly, I don't know where the budget comes from. So I haven't historically worked in primary care. I don't know where the budget's coming from, but there is clearly budget for it.
Yeah.
It's a monthly fee, right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are self-paying or they're freebies.
So it's a relatively low, arguably relatively low per user cost that a practice or a network could decide to pay, right? Because they think, if we use this technology, we can create efficiency and then get rid of the backlog. And some of my mates work in primary care, and they said that we don't have the 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday rush anymore because they use software to triage, right? So that has made a material difference. So that's cleared, a significant amount of the backlog of patients, and that may be where I don't know where the funding is coming from, but it may be coming from those other small efficiency pieces. AVT is interesting. I think it's technology that makes sense, but I also, I use Zoom, I use Otter, I use a heap of those different things.
Yeah.
To date, none of them have been great for me.
Yeah, and then the other sort of sacred cow that's been sacrificed by AVT is interoperability. Like, that's another thing, again, that's been hammered into you. Like, it's got to integrate open standards, DICOM protocol, blah blah blah. And then you hear how are people using these AVTs, and they're opening a separate web browser.
Yeah,
and you're like, wait a minute, what happened to integrate? And they're copy pasting stuff into the electronic records.
So, look, we talked before this started about a horrific case of a very large integration cost for a project.
Yeah.
So this is all about contracting, right? So if you are an NHS procurement person
Yeah.
and you are writing a contract for any kind of technology, you should ask for open book pricing on integration. So you should say standards based is the baseline, right? It
Yes.
has to be standards based, API based. So if it's standard and API based, then any third party should be able to build an integration, and that should be able to connect to your system almost free of charge, right? Maybe a bit of testing, but almost free of charge. You should also specify that you want a test system, so you can do that off the main live system. But then separately to that, you should say for any bespoke integration code writing that's required, there is a fixed day rate.
Yeah.
So let's just say it's 1,200 quid a day, 1,500 quid a day. Then the vendor has to, the provider of the system has to say, this is going to be 4 days of engineering, and therefore it's 4 days times X, which is in the contract, which is 1,500 quid, it's
Yeah.
6 grand, right?
Yeah.
Make it open book.
But why? But the other question is why? So with AI implementation imaging, your contract, and you would have seen it because you signed a lot of them recently with Annalise, the requirement for PACS integration and standards-based integration for you as the AI
Yep.
vendor. But it seems like those rules don't apply to AVT vendors because the buyers are happy for them.
To be fair,
Yeah.
to be fair, even with imaging, it's not super simple, right?
Okay, tell us.
So you could integrate with the same PACS platform in 4 different sites, but at different versions, and they
Right.
could have different costs to deploy.
Right.
Some of them could be done by the PACS manager as a simple DICOM node, which they can set up themselves, no cost. Some could be, a simple, the PACS vendor has to do it, and it's like half a day's work. And some of them could be more complex, right? And it really depends on the age of the system and what it can accept. I mean, some PACS systems still can't accept a connection, right? So then you've got to put a broker in. Sometimes they can't do the triage, so you need a separate broker in for the triage. And to be fair to the PACS vendors, it's not always the PACS vendor's fault. There are occasions where an organization will not allow an upgrade, so they will not allow a PACS to be upgraded because the infrastructure is too old.
Yeah.
It needs more RAM, it needs more, GPU, it needs more, or there's something it can't integrate with another system in the hospital, which then means they can't upgrade the PACS till they've upgraded the risk.
You get like a deadlock. Yeah.
You win a deal to sell it to implement AI, and next thing you know, yeah, we can do that. We can do that in 2 years' time because we've got to do an EPR PACS risk upgrade, and we've got to do 4 other things as well, and we've got no resource. So some of this is just the historic situation that early adopters of technology have with legacy systems. If you go to places like Turkey, the Middle East, you don't have these problems because they're on like first or second generation.
Yeah, so it's more greenfield.
So like, everything is relatively modern and they can move more quickly.
Yeah. And then on that topic and moving to the 10-year plan and what are they called? Neighbourhood clinic, care clinic, neighbourhood something,
neighbourhood health services.
Yes, something like that. Well, one of the things that I've always had a big bet on for the long term is that we'll start to see like real meaningful ROI from AI when we can really transform how we deliver care services.
Yep.
And that requires much more integration across primary, secondary care, and kind of along the lines of what is proposed in the 10-year plan. Just continuing the technology theme, if you were to advise West Streeting or whoever's responsible for implementing the plan, what would you advise when they're investing in the technical infrastructure for this sort of new model of care? And you mentioned some of it already around this sort of open book pricing on work and integration, but is there other things?
I genuinely think there's enough skill and enough knowledge to use things like open EPR, because the amount of money that you spend buying a system from a monolithic company that's based in a faraway country to implement something like an EPR. I mean, it's significant digit millions.
Yeah.
For me, it feels like you would get better value building your own, but that's an
and then an NHS in-house open platform.
Absolutely, because I think that, and then you think about Spine, you think about where at the end of LSP where we were when everything could have been centralized, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about single care records, when you think about patient identifiers, I live in Croydon.
Yeah.
If I go to 4 or 5 different hospitals near me, they can share the DICOM through IEP, but it's not simple, right? It's push. And that doesn't make any sense. when you think about strategically, any patient anywhere in the UK should be able to be seen by anyone, anywhere. That should be the goal.
Yeah.
How we get there, really, you need to take, so that there is also too many systems. One of the things I really liked about the 10-year plan is that there was focus on getting rid of legacy systems.
Okay.
So if the NHS focuses on getting rid of legacy systems, it frees up a significant amount of resource, because those old systems that are creaking and falling over take up probably 80% of the resource. If you
Yes.
get rid of those, that gives you significant amount of resource to then deploy and deliver new technologies, which is what we need. You can't do both. You can't keep all of the old and then bring in new with the same amount of resource. So you either need to up the resource or you need to get rid of some of the old. So I thought that was an interesting piece in the 10-year plan. I haven't read all 168 pages.
No, I don't believe anybody has, even
Liam will have.
Oh, really? Yeah, a lot of people post on LinkedIn. I'm not sure how much I believe their reviews. Around the sort of supplier landscape, I was at a private meeting where somebody senior at NHS England said something along the lines of, look, if we had one supplier win it all, it would make everyone's life easier, and we just kind of need to get over that fact. Is that the solution to some of our ills? Like,
I don't think so. I don't think so. I really genuinely
manage
don't think
convergence.
Because all you do if you do that is you end up getting a single supplier who then becomes lazy.
Yeah.
So history shows us that if you have a single supplier, there's no intensity, and the experience and the quality goes down. You want to have, and the NHS is a big beast. You want to have 3 or 4 suppliers in every category, and you want the ability to take suppliers out and then add new suppliers in as new technology comes in. One of the biggest challenges is, for the AIDF, we had to join something called the CCS, Crown Commercial Services Framework.
Oh yes, the AI.
So the Crown Commercial Services Framework is hundreds of pages, tens of appendices. And if you think about a small company, a small UK-based company that's trying to get on those frameworks, that's got an amazing AI solution, it's impossible.
Yeah.
You either close your eyes and just say yes to everything, or you review it and then you just die of fear, because it's just so much to read. The things about
and the insurance policies you've got to buy in.
And I'm not saying it's wrong, but QMS, IT security, all of those things, which are super important, but they're very complicated. And then when you win a deal and you sign a contract, you've got DPIA, DTAC, clinical safety. And those things currently, I mean, our experience, my experience in the UK to date has been, you can sign a DPIA with one organisation, and then the one next door won't accept it.
Yes.
And it's
classic problem.
And we spoke to NHS England and said, look, is there any chance you could soft mandate this? And they said, yeah, we kind of have.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if there's a legal owner of that document that works for a legal entity, they have to make sure that they're reassured and they're happy with what the content is, right? Which is their responsibility.
Yeah.
So until the time comes where that becomes easier, it's always going to be a challenge. In the 10-year plan, it does talk about, if you do it once, then other people should be able to copy and paste, right? So that feels like it's a step forward.
Yeah.
But we know that culture in the NHS is difficult. And when you asked about deployments, one of the biggest challenges in any enterprise software sale, whether you're selling into banks or healthcare or retail, is onboarding and customers using it. So I always used to joke, you've got like 30, 30, 30, 10. 30% of people will be happy, love it. 30% of people will be neither happy nor sad. They'll just use it and they'll get on with it. 30% of people will hate it because they preferred the old system. Well, they might have hated the old system, but they hate this one as well. And then 10% of people, they're the ones that could tip it over the line, right? They could go any which way. But my experience to date has been, and I've sold outside of healthcare, that it's literally a 30, 30, 30, and particularly in the NHS, if you've got 30% of users really happy using it, that is really good.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good, but that's really good.
Yeah, of course. And then I wanted to cover all of these challenges around selling to the NHS, which won't be new to most people who are listening in. Don't create a super friendly environment for especially small vendors. Like you just described, like some of the challenges on getting onto some of these framework creates such a high barrier to entry. And then you've got the challenges, even if you win competitions or tenders, is a challenge around change management and implementation, and then third-party fees and all this other business.
Yep.
One of the things that I'm conscious of, both as CEO of Newton's Tree, who is dependent on AI vendors, but then also in my previous role at Gardens and Thomas's, where I was actively looking in the market to help us solve clinical problems. We quoted the number, I quoted the number around the FDA number of FDA approved algorithms, but if you take a health system focus around what are the problems that I actually have
Yep.
that I need solutions for, there's not a lot out there. There's a lot of problems that we have for which there aren't good products. And part of me thinks we haven't created a friendly environment for companies to build and flourish.
It's a good point. I mean, arguably, is Pixel AI the answer to the problem?
And well, often it's not. Like if you're in any like trust or ICB board meeting, radiology almost never gets mentioned.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, we're in the imaging space, right?
Yeah,
So when you think about the imaging space, what are the problems? One is reporting. One is efficiency. So how do you encourage patients to turn up?
Yeah.
How do you encourage the patients to turn up at the right time?
Yeah.
How do you then make sure that they're going on the fastest possible pathway? So one of the great projects that Annalise did was same-day CT, right? Patient turns up, but patient gets referred from the GP to a hospital, and then it's read by a reporting radiographer and the AI. And if they think that there's something untoward, then the patient goes directly to the CT, right? Then the patient goes and has a CT, and then it gets reported, and that saves a significant amount of days in the patient pathway. And that could be a staging difference, right, between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, which again could have a material impact on that patient outcome. So all of that stuff's really important. But when the patient turns up to have an X-ray, and they park their car, and they get 60 minutes of parking. And then the radiology department say, we just need you to wait and have a CT, and that's going to take another hour and a half.
Yeah.
Well, if they haven't got money for parking.
Yeah.
So there's the change management piece there is really significant. And I mean, it's really interesting selling, imaging AI. Reporting radiographers are absolutely the biggest stakeholders and the biggest cheerleaders that I've seen to date, right?
How's that?
Because they embrace the technology. They're much more open. Of course, there's lots of radiologists that love AI as well, but my experience is that reporting radiographers are more open to change than radiologists.
Yeah.
And I couldn't put my finger on why that is, but it really does seem to make a difference.
Yeah. The other angle to this,
which is unique to the UK.
Yes, yeah, is price, which can sometimes be an ugly word. The NHS in a lot of domains prides itself on its ability to get competitive pricing.
Yep.
We have some of the cheapest Monjaro in the world, right? especially compared to the Americans. But if you're a small startup and you've got a heavyweight on the other side who's not used to paying big contract values, and then you've got all your costs that we've talked about a lot, does that not also make, does the NHS have to worry about being overly competitive on pricing compared to other markets? And is that a reason why we see so many health tech founders shift focus to the US?
I think the price sets itself. I think the complexity, the reason why I believe that people shift from the UK to the US, well, a lot of founders will set themselves up in the UK. They'll get some NHS logos. They'll go to parts of Europe. They'll win, very specific. If they're super targeted and super strategic, they might might try and win a couple in Belgium and Holland. They might try and win something in Italy, maybe something in Iberia, maybe something in the Nordics, and then they might go to the Middle East or they might go to the US, because everyone wants to know that they're buying something that works.
Yeah.
The NHS as a label is renowned around the world. Right?
Yes.
If you've got NHS customers, there's a feeling that is obviously there's a quality solution and there's due diligence. And actually there is. It's hard to sell in the UK. I mean, it's one of the hardest markets in the world, bar none. I think the price just works itself out. So I think if you have a solution that adds value, the price will work itself out. There are some challenges with pricing where some of the companies that are selling are quite distressed. So they've got to the end of their runway, and now they just they're desperate for revenues any which way, and they're selling super cheap. That then devalues the solution, And that causes a significant negative impact, because the companies that do invest more in people, in process and in quality, then end up suffering because they can only charge what the
others are
what the
charging.
minimum is, because that's how procurement works, right?
Yeah.
You know, most of the points are based on the price. So I think that there is a challenge there as well. Customer acquisition costs are high, so winning, you know, you need good people. So, you know, when I talk to customers, partners, it's the teams that have the most market-facing people that win. So you've got to have a good product, right? So assuming you've got a good product, four companies all with good products, the one with the best people is going to win more of the deals.
Tell me what you mean by market-facing people.
So clinical applications training or customer success, commercial people, QARA people that can go and talk to the DPO, the clinical safety officer, project implementation people, engineers. They, you know, you don't
can deal with the health system.
Who understand that if a system goes down, but it's not your fault, it's someone else's fault, you still need to be on the phone. You still need to help do the guidance. You still need to go through the triage. And that's really all about people. And you see the companies that do really well, that they're the companies that have got people that go an extra mile and really are focused on the customer experience.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You also mentioned, this almost, it's not strategic, it's sort of desperate lowering of pricing when some of these startups get sort of to the end of their runway. But there's also strategic lowering of pricing. We've probably seen the biggest sort of success story out of this being sort of the Palantir approach, right? Very famous £1 contract during COVID. It was all very generous. People got very familiar with their solution. They liked it, and then were in prime position for the FTP, which by all accounts, they were far and away the clear or the best solution, no doubt because of the experience they got during COVID. That sounds like, in some cases, it can be a winning strategy if you deploy it correctly.
There's a huge difference between a company like Palantir that has got, I don't know how many digits of investment they have behind them, but that's a significant business, versus a startup that might have, you know, a few small ticket investors. You know, they might be single-digit million, they might be double-digit million, but it's an entirely different game, right? So you can't really compare those.
Why is it a bad decision for the small startup to do strategic lowering pricing?
I'm not saying it's good or bad. In fact, what you would have found if you looked at the market over the last 5 years, and really AI has been sold for 5 years, is lots of deployments have gone free of charge, right? There's been lots of POCs, lots of 3 months turning to 6 months, then into 12 months, then to like the manana, the never nevers. So you implement it, doesn't really do what you need. You haven't really built out a tight scope. The customer's not really getting the greatest experience, so you just keep going, hoping it's going to get better. And sometimes it gets better, sometimes it doesn't, right? And you see some healthcare providers have replaced their first gen AI with second gen AI, right? So they've had something, it was great for them at the time, something else has come along and that's been better. And interestingly, with gen AI, arguably there could be gen AI models that step over all of what's happened if they can find a way of getting regulatory approval, right? So if gen AI can get locked down in a way that is regulatory approved and regulatory okay, then arguably the next generation of AI should be potentially much better than all previous generations. And add more value, right? So what does a hospital need? It needs to make sure it sees the right patients in the right place at the right time. With the right staff and the most efficient workflows. What currently happens is generally patients go to the most expensive part of the hospital, which is A&E. And they queue up there for hours and they get worse. And it's probably the best place to get sick, A&E, because there's so many germs in an A&E department. If you could outsource some of that to triage, but the problem with triage is you can't triage without resource. If you outsource the triage and you resource that triage and you used efficient tools to do that, and whether that's using the GP, the 8 o'clock calls on a Monday morning that the GP gets because patients didn't want to go to A&E over the weekend, and then you're like, okay, where do we send these patients? Don't send them to the hospital, send them to the polyclinic, send them to this particular place, physio, derm, whatever. If you can find a way of localizing those services into the neighborhoods, then I think the NHS becomes significantly more efficient. And better for the patient, and much better for the patient's experience.
So what's the, maybe not one thing, but what's something that you're hoping the future with AI looks like? I guess you sort of partially painted it, right? So you have a much more proactive system that potentially doesn't even let you get into the hospital. It sort of is that what the future is?
I think so. I think there's a lot to do. There's a lot to be said for ownership of your own health, right?
Interesting.
Which is an incredibly difficult position, right? So if you own your own health and you do exercise and you look after yourself and you eat well, you do it anyway. If you don't do that, it's very hard to get on that journey. And you see some of the GLP-1s, they enable people to lose significant amounts of weight, which then enable them to then become healthier and fitter, which then takes significant stress out of the health system, right?
Yeah.
So there are some transformational pathways that can help people regain ownership of their own health. If we had, you know, and then wearables is another thing in the 10-year plan.
Yeah.
You know, 2035, I think they're saying.
Yeah.
If you know, I've got a wearable. I know what my blood pressure is. I know what my pulse rate is. I know when there's something wrong with me because there's obvious signs, right? My blood pressure goes up, my heart rate goes up. So I personally take some ownership of my own health. I think there's a starting point. I think the other is, how do you make hospitals more efficient and how do you make access to healthcare more efficient? No one wants to go to a hospital. Like, you know, there's no one I know that wants to go to a hospital. If I go to the GP and they say, oh, you need to go and have an X-ray, I don't want to go to Croydon Mayday or Epsom and St Helier or East Surrey. I'd much rather go to a local polyclinic and have an X-ray there. So the more services that get moved out of hospitals, the better it is. And then the hospitals become specialist care centres with really good staff and really, really good pathways. So you stay in for the least possible time, you're looked after really, really well, and you're treated with dignity, you're fed very well, and then you go home at the end of it.
And how far away do you think we are from that?
That has nothing to do with AI.
Yeah.
So AI is an implemental step that can help all of those things.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you know, I've spent a bit of time in hospitals over the last year or so. My dad had dementia and died at the end of last year. You know, it's a pretty horrendous experience going to hospital with an elderly man with dementia, because what can they do? Like, there is really nothing they can do. And A&E is the wrong place to be. But if something happens at the weekend, 8 o'clock on a Saturday, there's nowhere else you can go. So I think that there is something around moving care out of hospitals. And interestingly, that is part of this localization. So I'm always positive. I think you have to be in sales. I'm optimistic and positive that the 10-year plan, the strategic vision of the 10-year plan is good.
Yeah.
Everything is about the detail and delivery. If they get 20-30% of it, I think that's succeeding, right? I mean, it's not perfect, but it's succeeding because it's such a difficult system with so much cost. And then the resident doctors are going on strike. You know, they're asking for 27%, and everyone that's not a resident doctor will look at that and think it's an absolute liberty, 27%. But when you look at the actual decrease in pay they've had, all they're asking for is parity.
Yeah.
But then if Wes Streeting, you know, if Wes Streeting gives them the 27%, that money's got to come from some other service. So the issue is, you've only got a certain amount of money in the pot. How do you become more efficient? And interestingly, we go back to that point around, how do you shut down legacy systems? How do you get rid of the cost? How do you get rid of all of those? You know, we've all been to those district general hospitals that are riddled with asbestos, that are falling apart. Middle of the summer, the heaters are on. You know, how do we change that to being places where you're happy to go to see an expert specialist who's going to give you the best possible outcome? And for me, AI is, look, I'm fully embraced AI in healthcare in the future, because if there's nothing wrong with me, I want to look at my app and say nothing wrong, fine, move on. Go and have an X-ray, nothing wrong, fine. If there's something wrong with me, I want to see a human being, and I want to see an expert human being who's going to say, Kevin, we found something. This is what it is. This is what our plan is. You're in the best possible hands. We'll do everything we can to help you. That's what you want, right? But the simple stuff, AI is fine. When it gets complicated and difficult and it's bad news, then you want to shake someone's hand. You want to sit in a room with a team of people that have been doing this for 25 years and know this inside out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. As you know, I just got back from Singapore last week, and I had the pleasure of meeting quite a few people. One of them was the Minister of Health, Minister Ong, and that was a really interesting dinner. And he mentioned Clayton Christensen's book around innovation, and he talks about Clayton Christensen's model of innovation is that the new innovation is always lower quality but better distribution, right? And he used examples like Amazon or fast fashion.
Yeah.
Is that everybody has more shoes, they're kind of crappier, but everybody has shoes.
Too many shoes.
Yeah,
in fact.
perhaps too many shoes. And one of the things that I fear is that with digital transformation in healthcare is we're going to create a similar world where we have better distribution. We'll have a doctor on our app and a guideline this and a wearable that, but actually it'll be lower quality. It'll be fast medicine, like
Yeah,
we have fast fashion. And so your dream of getting a concierge service when you need it is like my dream of affording a Savile Row tailor. It's like, yes, I tell myself that I'll have an occasion important enough to justify that expenditure, but it'll get to a point actually where I will never go to Savile Row.
But fast medicine's fine if there's nothing wrong with you.
Yes.
So,
But
as an example, you know, I mean, look, how often do you how often do you get very dressed up?
Very rarely, unfortunately.
Let's say, how many times a year?
Maybe once or twice.
So, and how many outfits have you got that you could wear for your very well dressed up once a year?
Maybe one.
Okay, and is it the same one you've worn for the last 10 years? So now's probably the time to buy a new best outfit, right?
Yeah.
And this is the same with healthcare, right? So, most of the time there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You go and see the dentist, they do the bloody clean, it's a pain, you don't really want it, but they do it anyway, they force you to have it.
Yeah.
But then when you've got a root canal, you've got a molar that's gone bad, that's when you're like, please, like,
yeah,
away, right? And it's the same with healthcare. Most of the time, there's nothing wrong with you. You have your blood tests, you have this, just, simple tests. They say, right, you need a statin, you need this, you need that. You go, you get the drugs, off you go. You don't really need that significant level of oversight. Most people don't.
Yeah.
For most healthy people, and there's lots of people with significant chronic difficult disease who need much more care.
Of course, yeah.
But then when you do need it, that's when you need the the Savile Row tailor.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because it reminds me of maybe our expectations were too high based on how things were before. I remember my mum telling me a story when my older brother was a baby and he was choking, and they called, I don't know who they called, but they had this was a Sunday evening.
Uncle, innit?
The GP came and they visited the house, and I was like, what? Like that was a thing, and I was like, yeah, and maybe that set too high a bar. And actually, the reality is, you can't expect somebody.
Yeah, but again, it's the when it's critical.
Yes.
You get the support you need. I think that's the key point is when it's critical, you get the support you need. And one thing we don't talk about with AI, which I berated you on many times, is that with if you deploy an AI, let's just talk about pixel AI, right? Which is locked code, it's not generative. So when you deploy a locked AI algorithm and you, for example, let's just use plain film. So you use plain film. Of course, there's difference in X-ray modalities. There's different in quality. There's different in age. Different in the way the image is portrayed. But ultimately, the algorithm will work the same to some degree.
Okay. Yeah.
If you go and see, if you go and have an X-ray, if you go and have an X-ray in a hospital and they've got 10 different X-ray machines, each of those X-rays could be different because they're different software levels, different manufacturers, different ages. If you then get those reported by 10 different radiologists, you'll get you're likely to get roughly the same, but there's going to be some differences. And pathology is even worse, right? Because pathology is basically counting cells. It's really tough. It's really difficult work and perfect for AI.
Yeah.
But pathology, AI, it's almost nowhere, right? It's the AI vendors in pathology are really struggling because one, digitization is still moving down the journey. The labs are super inefficient, so the lab spend is really how do we move these machines to make the lab work, regardless of digitization. But the tools are there, right? The tools are literally sitting on the on the shelf, ready to go. That can make tremendous difference. So I think there is a tipping point around how do we make sure we're comparing apples for apples. And you go and see if you live in London, they're generally very well resourced radiology departments. If you were to go to somewhere in a more difficult, more regional part of the UK, they may not have specialist radiologists, right? So you get what you get. So AI brings massive parity there.
Of course.
You've got all of these, slightly different challenges around infrastructure change, people change, culture change.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that AI is the only solution.
Yeah. No, fantastic. We're 1 minute away from the hour, so I'm going to wrap this up by asking you one very final question, which I appreciate a brief answer to, which is, if you could give advice to your younger self who was just starting off in this career, what piece of advice would you give them?
It might not make sense to people that know me, but to be more confident, believe in myself.
Yeah.
The number one advice I give to anyone is try things.
Yeah.
If they don't work, don't beat yourself up. Just learn from your mistakes. Learn from the experience.
Fantastic. It's a beautiful way to end it. Thanks so much, Kev.
Thanks, Harris.
Thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll wrap it there.